Hi, everyone. Welcome to this Adnexi live stream. My name is Sandra Shpilberg. I'm the founder and CEO of Adnexi, a platform that allows biopharma and patients to learn about all the patient advocacy groups and influences out there for their specific disease. We hold these live streams to learn more about this relationship between biopharma and its stakeholders. And today, my guest is Mike Walsh. He's the president of Patient Advocacy Strategies. Mike, welcome.
Hey, Sandra, thanks for having me.
Yes, it's a pleasure. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about the genesis of patient advocacy strategies and sort of the career that took you to this place.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great place to start. So I spent my whole career of, 25 years now in the biotech industry. The last half of that run has been in the patient advocacy and engagement space. I started patient advocacy leadership roles at MedImmune, then went to Biogen, Intermune, and Genentech. And I launched patient advocacy strategies about 4 years ago this fall because I recognized the critical need that where patient advocacy and engagement support was needed, particularly with the earlier stage companies, right? The ones that didn't have budget for a headcount for a VP of patient advocacy to build out the stand-up function. But, there are 1,500 life science companies in Massachusetts alone, most of which are clinical stage, small, understand the responsibility to initiate dialogue with patient communities, but there aren't a heck of a lot of them that really know how to do it the right way with authenticity. And so I got the guts to break the golden shackles of Genentech and started PAS, like I said, 4 years ago, which it's flown. And we do work with a vast array of life science companies, really at all stages of development, with both strategic and tactical patient advocacy and engagement support. Our objective, our underlying objective, is to build trust on behalf of these companies, right? Authentic trust and transparency, and start to introduce these companies that we work with as leaders in their related disease communities. And it's been really, really incredible. Best thing I ever did.
That's fantastic. I always applaud the people that are willing to take that risk and, leave corporate America like I have done and then go start your own thing. I think that generally you are rewarded and it's a really awesome journey to be on. So that's fantastic. So let's go a little bit deeper into what is the role that patient advocacy can play in the development of a new treatment?
I think, in a word, insights, right? Valuable insights. And I think that, the earlier that you initiate discussion with patient communities, the more value that they can infuse into literally everything that a company does. And, a lot of folks will think, well, we're not even in the clinic yet, so we don't really need to bring the patient voice in. But the truth is, and more people are finding this out, that, interfacing with patients and amplifying the patient voice as early as possible can inform what the company's website looks like, how they speak to external stakeholders, even how they speak to investors, right, in the media. And then as they get into developing protocols and study design, the patient voice couldn't be more important. And it's amazing to think that clinical trials were ever conducted without patients there. I think the old school system of, just connecting with physicians is gone. And now patients are at the table with as prominent, if not more prominent voice than KOLs and disease experts on the clinician side. But I think you need to, and this is where the Adnexi platform is so valuable, in that it convenes the entire disease landscape, right? And it's not just physicians, it's not just patients, it's caregivers, it's literally anybody who has influence or interest in a condition, a health condition, particularly the ones with, high unmet medical needs for which there aren't current therapies. Bringing that patient voice in as soon as possible just starts to bring this myriad of value. And I think people are starting to see that. When I first started going out knocking on doors 3.5 years ago, I'd go to companies who were in phase 3 and they'd say, oh, this is too early to bring the patient voice in. Wait till we're just about FDA approval. And now I have preclinical companies who aren't even in clinical trials yet who come to me and say, you know what, we know it's important. We want to get this right. We want to do it the right way. We want to build trust. How should we think through this? So just that, paradigm shift and evolution in the past 3 or 4 years, I think is really encouraging for both patient communities and industry alike.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic and correct. I mean, as it relates to Adnexi, that's exactly what we try to do. We try to help both biopharma and patients to see the landscape, right? Because for patient advocacy, I think that what's happened is that the type of a patient advocate is changing now. It's not only that national organization for the disease, but it might also be that influencer that is posting content every day on Instagram or on Twitter on their own account to support other people with the disease. So, when it comes to your work, are you doing most of the work still with the national organizations, or you're also reaching out to individual influencers?
It's a blend, right? Because as you just articulated perfectly, and as the Adnexi platform, sort of distills, whoever influences the whoever's in the patient community, making influence is who we engage with. And I found that it used to be a lot, just go to the national groups or the chapters, interface with them, and you've got it covered. But a lot of those influencers, the individual patient influencers who might be super active on social media, might not even be affiliated with any of the national advocacy groups. So I think you need to integrate all of the influencers and engage strategically with all of them, because all of them can we always are going to have the sort of the vocal minority of patients who might be sort of the face of the movement. But the deeper you can dig to find what are other people feeling, right? Somebody who has goes to Boston Children's Hospital and has different level of care than somebody in rural America who might not even see a specialist, so they might have different needs. So if you're a company and you're trying to appeal to a certain condition, I think you need to sort of digest the entire scope of the disease community and how it impacts patients and where the unmet needs are, and try to address those unmet needs as a company beyond just your clinical program.
Thanks, Mike. And then the place where I want to go next is you talked about timing, right? And for many of us that worked in biopharma before, we know that things start to heat up around phase 3, pre-launch. That's when we do these big efforts to begin to prepare for the launch of a new treatment. But you said, earlier is better, as early as possible. So I'd love for you to take us through what can happen early on. So for example, if biopharma starts working with patient advocacy, right, at the earliest possible moment, what would that interaction look like?
So I think they can answer a lot of questions that a company has as a company embarks on wanting to be a leader in this disease area. I know that no company's ever said that it was not worth it and that they started too early and that they should have waited, right? Look, we know patient groups and patients themselves are incredibly sophisticated, never more than they are now. And they're aware of these programs that might be, that the Wall Street might not even be aware of yet. And they want to see these things through, and they want to provide a voice for this patient population to inform these clinical programs. So I think, to answer your question from specifics, I mean, they can inform the design of a website. They can provide input on patient-facing materials. I think most valuably for a preclinical company, as I mentioned before, they can provide input on meaningful outcomes and what's important in a clinical trial. So clinical trial design should have patients' fingerprints on it from the get-go. And I think, it's obviously it adds immense value to the company and the study, and hopefully gets them better street cred with the FDA, that it's been validated by the patient community. But it also builds this long-term relationship that's sustainable, that's two-way, that's not transactional. It's a partnership, really. And I think that's the goal, is to build trust through these patient, industry partnerships. And, gone are the days when patients couldn't talk to industry and industry said, we can't talk to patients. Right now, I mean, everybody, the FDA, the Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative, every entity recommends strongly and borderline mandates that patients need to have a seat at the table as early as possible. And so I think, companies need to harness that and do it. So I think, at every stage of development, there's a place where the patient voice can add value in a different way, but very, very valuably. So it's great to start early and go, because it just opens up so many more opportunities when you have that trust and you have that sustainable, ongoing two-way relationship.
Yes, and that makes perfect sense. And I think the key word there is trust, right? And trust is not something that gets built in a day, right? It's generally something that gets built over time, right? By both parties showing that they can, they can show up to the relationship and they can ask each other, they can reflect the comments. So I think that that's really the important point, that trust is really built over time. So we're in the middle of a pandemic. COVID-19 is here. So I'd love to hear from you how this pandemic, COVID-19, has impacted patient advocacy, patients, and the sort of this whole relationship between biopharma and patient advocacy.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I mean, none of us expected this, obviously, so nobody really knew what was going to happen. But I think a couple things I've noticed. First of all, most of the clinical stage companies who have active trials or are recruiting for trials, those trials were and are in some cases still, postponed or just suspended for a while, right? Trying to figure out how they're going to do this. People, especially with severe medical conditions, aren't going to go to hospitals amidst this. So how can we? I think first off, they looked at, how can we harness telemedicine? How can we do things that can keep the trial moving forward without it requiring somebody to come, be put in a high risk place like a hospital. But the silver lining is, it stretched out the timelines for a lot of these companies, and Wall Street doesn't love that. But I think it's given the companies a valuable opportunity to take a breath and say, we have more time than we thought, so let's get this right. And for us, it's been beneficial because they're doubling down on what can we do, bring these patients in to say, when we restart enrolling in this trial, how can we do it, in a way that they're receptive to and that connects with them. So it's been great for, I think, patients to have more input than just sort of ad hoc. Hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? Now they're more, they're more engaged, and I think more deeply. And then obviously from a, how do you operate amidst the pandemic? There are no patient meetings. There are no professional society meetings. I mean, we've all had to find different ways to connect and provide, productive information exchanges through mediums like this. And I think, there's obviously a lot of Zoom fatigue out there. But in the meetings obviously aren't the same because, we talk about trust and building authentic relationships. It's nothing will beat sitting down over a cup of coffee or a dinner or a glass of wine with a patient family and just listening to understand the needs. But right now, this is the best we can do. And it's really given us, I think, an opportunity to be innovative and try to figure out how can we do things differently. My digital team just came up with a virtual exhibit booth concept where, these companies who now are sponsoring a patient or professional society meeting and have, access to, they can be an exhibit booth. Mm-hmm. We've created a platform that can sort of bring the materials that they have and the company information to life so that it can sort of pop as much as it can pop, absent, somebody sitting next to you, shaking your hand and talking to you or asking a question. If you have this exhibit booth that can, have a medical science liaison that can answer questions from somebody about the clinical trial, or, where can I go to get more information, and they can be directed to some of the sites. So it's been added some complexities, but I think created some opportunity for both sides.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, of course, the pandemic has been super difficult for lots of people, but it's also forced us to adopt, right, new technologies, adopt telemedicine, and still continue to build the relationships that matter. So I want to go now into ideal land, right? And so if you could have it your way and craft the perfect relationship between biopharma and patient advocacy for a specific disease, take me through what that would look like from beginning to end.
Well, again, it would be starting before you're even in the clinic, starting to bring patient voices in, literally and figuratively, right? Bringing patients in to instill this culture of understanding. I mean, we talk to scientists at companies who've dedicated their life to a certain disease. They've never even met a human being with that disease. So we're trying to do everything we can to start early and, so that everybody at a company, regardless of the size, before they're even into the clinic, can understand what it's like to have this disease. And how powerful that is on enhancing the value of the culture. So I think just starting early and listening to understand, right? The old big pharma model of patient advocacy engagement was transactional. It was listening to respond, right? Not listening to understand. So I think if we can get these, senior leadership teams and different folks at these companies to do more than just go to a fundraiser or write a check or go to a walk, right? It's actually sitting down and listening to truly understand the needs of the community. So if you can do that at the outset, then you can ask all these questions and understand what the patient needs are, and then everything from clinical trials to FDA action, right? I mean, you have these relationships, and if you've invested early on, you're going to have this two-way relationship that we've been talking about, so that you can call upon these people to help serve as champions and ambassadors for your company, your program, and try to amplify the value of innovation and the power that it can have, the positive impact it can have on a patient community. So, I mean, if you invest at the outset, then you're going to have these folks as patients, as partners through the continuum, through FDA approval. When you launch, you're going to have folks who are out there, addressing access policy, other things that might, be a barrier. You have patients who can advocate on your behalf to drive this forward and enable the most patients with this condition have access to an approved treatment. And I think it's amazing.
That's so great. So what I'm taking away from that is start early, listen to understand, and then continue to work on that relationship so that that trust can be built and the relationship can deliver more and more value, right, to both parties, right, to the biopharma to deliver a better treatment, to the patients to get a better treatment at the end of the day that reflects their needs. So that was wonderful, Mike. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think we got pretty deep into a lot of these important topics at this intersection of biopharma and patient advocacy. Where can people find you?
We're at patientadvocacystrategies.com, and I'm Mike Walsh, and I'm on LinkedIn. So thanks for the opportunity, Sandra. It's been great working with you, and I look forward to continued collaboration.
My pleasure, Mike. It was great to have you on. Thank you. Thank you all. See you soon.